to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in November 1st here on the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined, as always, by Matthew Icarus Betz. Yes, he's that hot, people, floating close to the sun.
Dude, this is unreal. It is unreal what has happened in the year 2022. Daily fantasy sports, player props, all the things. I say it every week, man. I know it is coming. I know the downfall is going to come sooner rather than later. Probably this week, probably next week. It happens every year. And so you're my good friend, Kyle. You know me well. Should I be ahead of this and just pull back my entries this week to get ahead of the crush I'm going to take soon?
I think there's some point where you just need to protect yourself. It's definitely not to go over your bankroll.
No,
I think that's the temptation for people. I was looking forward to, getting back on this podcast with you after reading out part of this past week. Mostly just to come back and say, you needed me. You needed me. You were going to fail. It's like, where were you, Kyle? You're the light of my life. And then you crushed it. You and Jason crushed it. You guys had a Kamara bet that I know a lot of people were pretty excited about. But, dude, do you even need me? Should I just log out right now?
Yeah, this is a solo pod for the rest of the year, so you're done.
Well, I'm just a puppet here just to kind of go through the motions and tell people, here's what you can do, and here's where you can sign up and listen to bets.
Dude, this would have been a slate for you, though, because Jason and I talked about this, and we were like, there's two options. You play Hurts, or you just completely punt it with Sam Ellinger, and you live for a punt quarterback play, and it does not get any more punt than Sam E in his first start at $4,000 on DraftKings.
Okay, so I love a good punt. I love 4K. I think I probably would have poked holes in some of the rushing upside that we saw in college and that people wanted to look at. Let's just go straight into that cash theory and cash picks because, man, from an outsider's perspective, I listened to the show. I got to, just see what everyone's doing. But I really got to kind of see how last week was a divergent place of we always want to pay up for quarterback, but this is a rare instance where we get a quarterback super cheap. So let's talk about the cash picks.
Straight cash, homie.
In the business, we call that a transition, and I needed to hit the drop for,
I mean, you're a pro.
I didn't even have to do that, but I did it anyways. Talk to me about this past week and your process, kind of where the field went. So just spoiler alert for people, I took this entire week off of DFS. We had some family stuff that I had to fly back to Atlanta for. And so I didn't play any props because they're not legal there. And I actually just said, I'm going to remove myself. I had to be available for my family. So I didn't actually get to play DFS this week at all. At all. I just said, I'm going to zero out. I'm not going to try to fit it in. So this is your stage, man.
Yeah, people come in and be like, Kyle, what'd you do this week? Nothing. Not a thing. Every now and then that's actually kind of nice to just take a week and then you come back and be like, okay, now I'm back in this, I can focus. But yeah, for me this week, it was, like I said, a tale of kind of two paths you could go. You could go up for Hurts or go down to Sam Ellinger. And there was really only kind of those two paths for me. That's where I was going. Jason and I talked. We said Hurts is definitely the better play as far as, in a vacuum, clearly better ceiling. But then as the weekend went on, you just look at what was available to you if you went down to Sam E. And it wasn't like Sam E was going to give us anything that we really cared about. If he gave you 12 points, you would be absolutely thrilled. I think he had 8.5 or something on DraftKings. But it was what he allowed you to do with your roster that made him, in my opinion, the better cash play this week. He was in our best plays article as the top play for cash games. And it's because you could fit Tyreek Hill in an absolute dream matchup against the Lions. You could fit Amon-Ra St. Brown. You could fit Ken Walker. You could fit Derrick Henry. I mean, any of these guys, and there were so many good running backs, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, in absolute dream matchups. So that's really what it came down to me. It was tough for cash again because it kind of felt like a lot of people were on that and then therefore spending up for the same plays. And it was like, if you spin up for, Jacobs instead of Kamara, you lost. Or if you spin up for Jacobs instead of Derrick Henry, you lost. So it was kind of one of those 2v2 weeks again. It kind of seems to be the theme this year. I'm not sure why that is, but definitely seems to be that on these smaller slates, if you make one incorrect decision, you really do get buried.
That's what it kind of comes down to is, are you on the wrong side of that for 50-50s? I saw a lot of people that played Jacobs because Jacobs was on a hot streak instead of Kamara. So it really does come down to a couple different plays each week. We try to give our best plays in the DFS Pass. We try to talk to those on this show, on Friday's show. And then I think the place where we see those kind of bear fruit most is in our Discord channel, where people are back and forth. And we have a question that I thought would be a good thing for us to kind of kick off the show before we go into the week 9. Is that where we're at?
I don't understand how it's November. What is happening?
Week 9 is what we will talk about. I had to get my week straight since I missed a whole week. But this one's from S. Retcher on Discord. Can you guys talk about if the chalk going off is an actionable trend for the season? For what I've seen, total ownership for the Millie Maker this year is about 30% higher compared to last. Wondering if we should start adjusting our GPP approach. And I will say, myself, I'm more of a contrarian GPP player. I haven't done as well in big tournaments this year because I like using the leverage, but we haven't needed that as much when we've seen the chalk pieces go off.
Yeah, it's been a wild year. We do get these weeks every year that there's maybe 3, 4, 5 of them where the chalk just goes crazy. And if you are a contrarian player, you kind of just take your L's and you move on to the next week. And I feel like people are feeling this more than usual because all those weeks are happening in such a small sample. We've only been through 8 weeks of the season, and there's already been, I don't know, would you say 4 weeks like that? Maybe 5, where it's just if you're a contrarian player, you lose. But it's a small sample. And I think that a lot of the principles that have shown over the course of years are going to come back to averages. The law of averages, everything returns to kind of the mean, that the chalk is not going to keep smashing in this fashion, I don't think, moving forward. So eventually it's going to come back. The pendulum's going to swing. And so I think now, sooner than rather than later, especially on these small slates that are going to be coming up, like 10 gamers, 11 gamers, now might be the time to start to get off the board a little more, because I would be shocked if this trend continued for an entire season.
Yeah, and I would say the actionable thing for me is to remind myself of which contests am I playing in for GPPs. If you're doing a 3 max or a 20 max, you do not generally have to get as off the board as everyone else because the field is usually smaller and people can't max enter it with 150 lineups and they're hitting the nuts. So I would say in those 3 max or in those single entries, you can play chalkier lineups and just adjust 2, maybe 3 pieces, and you'll be fine. I will be playing contrarian if I'm playing in large field tournaments, because if the field's going to respond this way and say, well, look at the chalkier plays, then I'm going the other way. We're playing for 1 week in GPPs. You needed to go into this knowing that you're going to have massive losses when you play in tournaments. You're playing against these other people that have perfect lineups. So that's just how I play in general. If I'm in those 3 max or 20 max, my lineups are going to look a little bit more chalky, but that's probably my only thing. You?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, we talked about it at the start. We say this every August just so people that are newer to DFS understand this is not a printing press. You're not going to win every week. If you know you're going to lose and you're still a really good GPP player as far as stacks, finding the right game environments, all those things, you could have awesome lineups on paper and it just doesn't work out 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row. But then all of a sudden in the 7th week, you win a GPP and your entire season is made, so that's what you play for, those top end outcomes. It's tough for a lot of people from a mental health perspective, from a, bankroll management perspective to have those losing weeks, but it happens every year. The chalk will fail. And if you start to adjust your approach too much now because of what's happened in a small sample, I think it's probably a wrong move.
Because Betz and I would say our bread and butter is cash, and it's been butter. Dude, straight butter for you this year.
Straight dinner butter.
Oh, dude. The best kind of butter, they say.
Elite.
Then you can build your bankroll through cash, but also realize what type of contests are you playing in for tournaments. Is it one of those things where you're playing, 60% of your bankroll in double ups in cash and you're doing all right, but you're spending the other 40% as just losses every single week? Maybe you need to lean a little bit more into cash, become a 70-30 type player, whatever you need to build your bankroll. If you want to get our picks, you can get them in the DFS Pass. while I was gone, I heard rumors that there's more and more that we're going to continue to add to the DFS Pass, that you and I are just going to be giving this thing away for free. If you go to dfspass.com right now and use the promo code DFSPod, you can get all of our picks, DraftKings, FanDuel, roster percentage report, and save 10%. And then what's this business about adding more people to our Discord, Betz? Why are we doing this?
Because it's the best place to be, and it's the best community ever, obviously. The Foot Clan, the loyal Foot Clan. Yeah, the Discord previously was actually just for the Patreon community, the jointhefoot.com supporters. But now, if you already have the DFS Pass, or if you're thinking about getting it, those people that just get the pass, you don't have to necessarily be a Foot Clan member. I mean, you probably should be if you want to be cool. But if you buy the DFS Pass, you're in the Discord automatically. So you have to go through and just kind of make sure that when you do it on the site, you click the right buttons to get in, but you get access, for free. It's just another addition. It's wild, man. The value is just crazy. We didn't even mention the props, dude. We're like 14-5 over the last 2 weeks. The DFS Pass is too cheap. I don't know how to say it.
I saw this in Discord from Prison Nick 937. He said, I bought the pass this morning, first time playing cash lineups, and I already doubled my money. So, I'm not saying this is the case for every single person, but it is a good case where you can do that. So go to dfspass.com. We would love to see you there. But let's talk about week 9.
State of the main slate.
Each week, we refer to the DraftKings Sportsbook line. It's where Betz and I play. You can go to sportsbook.draftkings.com if you want to join in. And we're going to check in on a couple that have gone up and a couple that have gone down. I will say that my Falcons under is not looking too good, but holy, we got a little breaking news on this pod.
Breaking news.
Go for it.
There's a lot of breaking news happening. We're recording this literally during like the final hour of the trade deadline, so things could get wild here. The 49ers are trading Jeff Wilson to the Dolphins. This comes right after Chase Edmonds was sent to Denver as part of the move for Bradley Chubb. That's exciting. I mean, Jeff Wilson was buried behind CMC. At least if you have him, you're like, okay, that gives me a little bit of hope that he might get some usage. And then this one, speaking of the Falcons, they're trading Calvin Ridley, who I haven't said his name in 7 months, 8 months, to the Jaguars. That's wild, man. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, he obviously can't play this year, but for next year.
Yeah, it's a bit of a stomach punch of Calvin Ridley, just because we had some great moments with the Falcons. I will say what the management of the Falcons has done, speaking as a fan, is when it's time to go, it's time to go. They did that with Matt Ryan. They did that with Julio, two of my favorite players in franchise history. So if you're moving on, I need to get details of the actual trade. And, our show's DFS, but it is exciting because I started tracking trades over the last 12, 13 years, and we're just getting more and more trades in the NFL, which is fun. I mean, it's probably just correlating with fantasy football, right? Just the GMs are used to trading in their fantasy leagues, and they're like, why don't I just do in the real thing?
Yeah, super fun. Chase Claypool is now a Bear. We had, what was the other big trade this morning? The one that started it off?
TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, Hawkinson, right, to the Vikings. This is wild, man. This is fun. I hope we get another one on the show.
Yeah, and reacting live just kind of says, what? Andy just put in our Slack, $5 whoever reports the next trade. In our Slack.
I'm pulling up Twitter right now.
I will not be on this podcast anymore. All right, let's go back to our quick wagers, and maybe we'll get interrupted again, and we'll give you our live reactions. Yeah, Falcons under does not look good for our season-long totals right now, and I think that's okay. It's fine. I'm caught in between as a fan and as somebody that looks at the team and go, okay, are we going the right direction? Are we just going to end up at 7 and 10? That's where it feels like it's going.
It's so wild. I was writing up for the Chargers and Atlanta game in the Vegas report in the DFS Pass, and I wanted to go in and be like, just like they want to run, they're slow, like maybe we should fade this game and all these things. And then I was looking at the metrics. I was like, wait, the Falcons are 6th in scoring. They're one of the best teams in the NFL against the spread. Like, this matchup for them is awesome. They want to run the ball. The Chargers want you to run the ball. And they're being quarterbacked by Marcus Mariota. I don't understand how it's happening, but that is not going to be a winning ticket. They are currently plus 130 to make the playoffs. And if the playoffs started today, they'd be hosting a playoff game. This is what's happening right now in the NFL, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, we need to be talking about them as the 4th-seeded Atlanta Falcons. And the Bucs can just hang out in the gutter. Let's talk about a couple that have gone well for us. We've talked about the Vikings and the Ravens. Those are two of the teams we were most bullish on before the season. The Vikings to win the North is currently at, what's it at now?
The line for the Vikings is currently minus 1,200.
Wow. So they think that's good and done. We were fortunate enough to get that at over plus 300 to start. So a lot of those off-season episodes, I would just tell people, season's over, but I would say prime time for you and I is when we get to like March and April, we can do forecasting for the NFL. So we have a ticket for Vikings to win the NFC North that looks really, really good right now. And why don't you talk about our Ravens?
Oh, I would love to. Our Ravens, man. Absolutely love them. I just realized I read the wrong thing. They're minus 900 for the Vikings. The Ravens are minus 1,200 to make the playoffs. We were all about them in the start of the season, and the offseason basically is saying, like, this team is going to come back down to earth as far as health. They had so many injuries last year. Unfortunately, we're kind of seeing that again with Rashad Bateman, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, all those things. But they've been able to overcome it. Great coaching. And now their schedule, it just opens up beautifully. They don't face a team that currently, as of week 9, has a winning record in their final 9 games at all. They are right now minus 400 to win the division. We were betting that. I think it was like plus 225, something like that. We have them to go over the win total to make the playoffs. We also have Lamar MVP. I mean, he's 4th odds right now. The odds have moved in our favor. He's now plus 1,000. But I feel like I need him to just go absolutely nuclear to have any hope of that. And with Rashad Bateman out, I don't know. But I'm happy for the Ravens. They're winning games, and they have a beautiful schedule coming up.
Yeah, season long, I feel really good about our outlook. And props, I feel like we've, in the DFS Pass, like we've really gone a great direction the last couple of weeks. So overall, if you're tracking with us, you can do that in the props channel in Discord. But let's talk about this slate context. It's the smallest slate of the year. We have 6 teams on bye, and then we have, another 6 teams off the main slate, and that includes some powerhouses like the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Ravens. So what's your initial thought on the player pool for this week, knowing who's not there?
Well, it's very weak. Extremely weak, actually. Because when you look at the teams that aren't there, I mean, on bye, you have some studs. Like the Niners aren't there. So, of course, we don't have CMC. There's no Debo. There's no Kittle. There's no Dak and CeeDee Lamb. There's no Saquon. I mean, there's so many guys. And then look at like the primetime games. Eagles are off the main slate. The Chiefs are off the main slate. The Saints, and then the Ravens, who we were just talking about. So the player pool is just weak in general, I think, especially tight end. When you look at kind of what we're used to doing as far as tournament strategy of hoping to spend up for a player that can really separate at the position, there's no Mark Andrews. There's no Kittle. There's no Kelsey. Dallas Goedert. Dalton Schultz has been looking pretty good recently. Greg Dulcich is a guy who's kind of emerging. The Muth, I mean, I'm going to be trying to spend as little money as possible this week, Kyle, on tight end because of how bad it really is.
Yeah, tight end is really gross. I think running back's really tough. Like running back, when there's no Henry, there's no Kamara, no Saquon, and CMC, as you mentioned. So keep that in mind as you're building your player pools early in the week, who's not there. And that kind of gives you context of who you need to spend up for. So you mentioned Zach Ertz. Like he actually looks strong as the tight end one compared to all these other options this week. And we'll talk about that game a little bit more as well. But give me the games that are 50-ish. And we've kind of had a couple that have towed the line.
Yeah, this week there's 2 that are right at 50. It's Green Bay and Detroit, and then Seattle and Arizona, and then the Chargers taking on Atlanta, your Falcons, number 1 seed Falcons in the division, 49.5.
That line is interesting because based on what happened last week, you're like, all right, Atlanta wants to, they can actually move the ball at will. Chargers are coming off a bye. I like the game because those are my 2 favorite teams in the NFL. So I'm just selfishly really involved, and I hope Keenan Allen is back. The implied totals this week, though, are a bit difficult for me to swallow because we have so many teams that are huge favorites, and a lot of those huge favorites are on the road. So how are we handling this? Because the team with the highest implied total is the Bills, at just over 30. I checked it out. That's the second highest implied total of any team this year. They had a 30.5 earlier this year. So how are you handling that with these onslaught builds?
Yeah, and historically this year, again, I mean, it's a small sample. We're only 8 weeks in, but still these onslaught kind of builds have actually been more favorable when there is a huge spread. So looking at, 8 plus, 10 plus spread, you don't really need to force a bring back. I mean, Vegas is telling us like they're taking on the Jets. The Bills are this week. They've got 17-point total. It's the lowest on the slate. Like, yeah, I guess you could force one in there, but you probably don't have to. And Josh Allen can still get there. His guys can still get there, even without the Jets pushing them. We know that. So a lot of times these onslaught builds without a bring back in these huge spreads make sense, especially for large field tournaments where you really have to hit the nuts. And I don't think we want to be forcing a bring back in these specific spots. When the spread is closer and you can really see teams going back and forth, yeah, then it makes a lot of sense and we want to maximize correlation. But historically this year, that has not worked out quite as much.
Yes. I looked up a lot of those, 10 plus point double digit favorites, and man, the bringbacks just couldn't get there at all. Like at all. And I even looked at the teams that were double digit underdogs. Their passing games averaged like 150 yards. So it's like, you can't really bank on anyone at all. So the Jets look like a team, was it 13 right now? Garrett Wilson's going to gain a little bit of steam because of last week, and they let Zach Wilson throw it more, but I feel like that team's just a trap. I'm probably not playing a lot of Jets. What do you think is the most popular game to stack this week?
Yeah, I put here just Seattle and Arizona, and I feel like the idea around these two teams is like, Seattle's really turned it around. They're playing pretty good on offense. Arizona's had 2 really nice games back-to-back on offense. But we saw these two teams play in week 6 not that long ago, and in that game, it was 19-9. So I'm not sure how I'm going to handle it. I think I might see what the field wants to do as far as our roster percentage report, because if people just look at the season-long stats for Seattle's defense, they're going to look pretty good. They've been one of the best defenses in the league over the last 3 weeks. Every team they've faced has hit the under on their team total, and it's been by an average of 10 points. So it's not like they're barely missing, like they're missing by a wide margin. And they've been really good. Number 1 in run defense DVOA, top 5 in total DVOA, top 5 in yards per play allowed, all these things. So I'm not saying the Cardinals are a bad play. I'm just saying if the field really does assume like this is the game that's going to go off, there's more outs, and we saw it in week 6.
Yeah, I'm worried about the Cardinals being able to effectively move the ball. It was 19-9 when these two teams played a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
It was gross. I'm going to say that the Miami-Chicago game doesn't project super well from a total standpoint, but people are going to be playing the Miami side. Not just because they were, killing it from pass rate over expectation, but this is an exciting team on trade deadline day, made a couple of deals. I think people are going to want this piece. I think Tyreek and Waddle are going to each be 15 plus, maybe 20% in tournaments. And so you're going to see stacks like that. I think Justin Fields might end up being one of the 2 or 3 most popular quarterbacks. So there's just a lot of roster percentage. I'm not saying it's a bad play. I'm just trying to point out that people will be on this game and you won't be that sneaky despite, looking at games with higher totals. So which game do you think will be sneaky?
Yeah, I put Chargers in Atlanta, and it's kind of like what I was talking about. Like, I think the people in general would say Atlanta's not good and they can't move the ball and their offense stinks. They're top 6 in scoring. They're moving the ball like crazy. Like, they're involved in high scoring games because their defense is so bad, Kyle. It is so bad. And this is a get right spot for the Chargers. That said, Mike Williams is out. Keenan Allen, for some reason, is not practicing coming out of the bye week, which is a bit of a red flag with the hamstring. Maybe it's just management. Who knows? We'll see. But like with both those guys out, it definitely takes a little bit of the excitement out of this one. But if you get a healthy Keenan Allen against the secondary, Austin Eckler you can play. And the Chargers want you to run the ball, and the Falcons want to run the ball. So I can see both teams really having success in terms of how they want to play. Chargers up in pass rate. Atlanta can't stop the pass. Atlanta wants to run the ball. The Chargers can't stop the run. So it actually sets up, I think, for a pretty good matchup for what these teams want to do.
No, it's a good matchup. We would love for the Chargers to play catch up and, have a ton of volume. There's also paths, like you mentioned, where this game just stinks and Atlanta can't move the ball and they're not effective. I'm going to say Minnesota and Washington is an interesting matchup that the Vikings are coming off the bye. Kirk Cousins on the road. I think there's some pieces here that I want a part of, especially against that Washington secondary that just lost. William Jackson just traded him to the Steelers. So I like this matchup. Taylor Heineke is a wild card, so you don't know what you're going to get. You're going to get either a competitive game or he's going to stink. So give me the volatility of that game more than anything else, and a Vikings defense that gives it up also through the air. Which game do you want to be underweight on, and you're just saying, I don't want to have anything to do with this?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Rams and the Bucks, and it's sort of scary to say because when you think about these teams, there's a lot of star power. You know, you've got Cooper Kupp, you've got Matthew Stafford, who this year hasn't been great, but last year was great. You've got Tom Brady and his guys, who again, this year have not been great, but Mike Evans is a star. Chris Godwin is a star. Leonard Fournette is great for fantasy. All of these things. But Cooper Kupp is currently dealing with an ankle injury, and the Bucks, for whatever reason, can't put up points. And I'm shocked that the line is kind of where it's at. You know, not as far as the spread, but just 42.5 points is so low that I would expect Vegas, who's obviously very sharp, they get this stuff right all the time, to say, like, we know these offenses are going to regress positively sooner than later. I logged in, I expected to see it at like 45, 45.5, and it's all the way down at 42.5. It's not one of the lowest on this slate. It's one of the lowest on the entire week 9 slate, including Thursday, Sunday night, and Monday. So, yeah, you can play some one-off pieces here, but it's just tough to get excited about these two teams right now.
I'm nervously looking through Twitter right now. Nothing. There's no breaking news. So the $5 is still up in the air, and it's just not trending well. I feel like
it's gonna happen. It's 3:17 Eastern. We got about 45 minutes, Kyle. It's gonna happen.
What's going to happen right in the middle of the segment? We're trying to talk to the people. We're trying to do our jobs, but we're also trying to do our jobs by looking at the news. Like,
yep, exactly.
What's more important, looking at Twitter or talking on this podcast?
You want me to answer that?
I don't know. You don't have to.
Okay.
I'll just say Indianapolis and New England just does not project very well. Sam Ehlinger ain't it. And in Foxborough just doesn't sound like a game I want to have too many pieces. Jacoby Myers, fine for cash. It's one of those times where you kind of say, like, is Jonathan Taylor, like, if he's going to go super underweight, maybe, but there's just so many issues with that team. They just fire their offensive coordinator as well. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back in. You know, people think that when we hit that button, that you and I just take a break, that, you know, we just go, get a breather.
Get up and stretch, get a drink.
Yeah, you know, like, I get it. You know, athletes, they can't go forever the entire game. They need some, you know, a couple snaps off, a couple breathers. You know, like LeBron's not going to play the whole game. He needs, you know, a minute here. Podcasters need, I don't know, 5-second break. That's what we just got when we hit the drop. Yep. And then we're right back. So it's that podcast life. You and I, we have podcast bodies. That's what we got. No, I would say we don't have average podcast bodies. All right. A couple more categories here before we go into salary standouts. Which team are you most confident hits the over of their team implied total?
If ever there was a get right spot for the Packers, it is this week against the Lions. Aaron Rodgers, in his career, is averaging a 6.9% touchdown rate against Detroit. Detroit has given it up to everyone at home specifically. They have really, really struggled. Every team they've faced at home has 27 or more points. Their games average over 71 combined points when playing at home. The Packers play slow. Yes, their efficiency has not been great, but this is the spot where it gets right. They're currently at 26.5. I think they can go 27 points, continue that trend against the Lions, who they just fired their secondary coach. They're bottom of the league in coverage grade per PFF, yards per play allowed, you name it. So, give me Green Bay. There's going to be some pieces here that I think we want to go to this week, especially my man Aaron Jones.
I'm going to go with Miami. I think that game has the potential to go over. It's 44.5. Got some exciting pieces. We know that they're going to throw. And I just trust, right now, I trust Tyreek and Waddle. I think one of those will be in my cash game lineup. Tyreek's price, we'll talk about in a second, didn't change, despite the fact that he went for 188 yards and 12 catches. Just trust that offense. And, man, I don't love that Mike McDaniel with kind of his smirk, I'm the smartest guy in the room look sometimes, like, is succeeding this early. But for analytics, for a fun team that throws the ball, I'm for that. I just think he's He's a little smug. Thoughts?
I mean, for good reason, right? This guy comes in, first-year head coach. His offense is one of the best in football. Yeah, it's okay to have fun sometimes, Kyle.
I know. I see. I was pro Brandon Staley. All right, seemed like a great guy. Last year was the thing, and then he's kind of regressed a little bit. And now we have this guy coming in all swagged out like he's too smart for his own good, and then he's the new hotness in the NFL. So just trying to bring him back to earth. He needs to be humbled. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, maybe. Maybe against the Bears. We'll see.
How old's Mike? I think he's like 38. We're basically the same age. That's what irks me. Which team are you most confident hits their under?
You know, it's really tough to see Sam Ehlinger go on the road and face Bill Belichick and put up 17 points. They looked awful last week with him under center. They just couldn't do much of anything. And especially considering Jonathan Taylor's ankle aggravation, they ran him out of shotgun. I don't know if you watched any of the game, Kyle, or saw some of the highlights. They ran him out of shotgun on almost every play, and it really did affect how Jonathan Taylor looked. So you combine your best playmaker is injured. You've got a quarterback making a second career start on the road in Foxborough. This is kind of like what we talked about a few weeks ago with Jared Goff and the shoe finally dropping for him, against Bill Belichick. That is not a spot I want to go to. So I don't think the Colts can hit 17 points this week.
There was a trade, Betz.
Oh.
It's not a fantasy relevant player.
Okay.
So, it doesn't really move the needle. I looked at the games this week, and the Jets were the team that stood out to me the most, that I just said, I can't get behind anyone else other than Garrett Wilson. I can't find any cheap pieces. They don't really want Elijah Moore to be on this team. He might get traded soon. But I think the Jets are just one of those teams in that onslaught build that I will probably not have in my player pools at all. All right, let's talk about the players we like for this week.
Salary standouts.
It's another week, and I feel like we have the same dilemma that you faced last week at quarterback. It's pay up for one option and one option alone, or punt. So, at quarterback on DraftKings, Josh Allen is 8,500 and Justin Fields is 5,300. You don't have to come to a conclusion because it's just Tuesday, but are those the two pretty clear options early in the week?
Yeah, to me, those look like the best, of the two tiers. It's you pay up for safety and elite upside, or go down for a player who we've seen have not only a floor, but also decent ceiling in the last 3 weeks. Fields has been great. Top 8 as far as fantasy, weekly scoring for season-long leagues, 3 weeks in a row. Running the football, he's very quietly second in the league in rush attempts among quarterbacks, behind only Jalen Hurts, second in the league in rushing yards, behind only Lamar Jackson. So I think that's going to continue. Miami, we talked about last week with Jason, they're struggling. They lost their slot corner for the year. They were down to safety. Byron Jones still wasn't ready. Xavier Howard, their starting corner, has been on the injury report literally every week with a groin issue. So it's just a matter for me of what the slate looks like come Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Do we have value that you can go up and get Josh Allen? If so, I'm playing him 10 out of 10 times. If the balance builds look more, appropriate this week, then Justin Fields to me is a totally fine play for cash games.
Yeah, I think we'll have a different conversation of the theory portion of what your lineup looks like if you have this later on in the week. It is worth noting that Justin Fields, his floor feels safe with his rushing attempts, 9.5. He averaged 53 rushing yards per game, so that feels pretty safe. There's some volatility for a player that has, I looked this up, Betz, the highest sack rate for any quarterback through 8 starts in NFL history. That's scary.
That's not great.
Yeah. I mean, it's a rushing quarterback, so maybe we just don't care. And we don't care in fantasy if he's going to run the ball this much. And if I like this game to hit the over, then I think. But those are our two top options. Josh Allen on FanDuel, more expensive because it's FanDuel, but I will be playing him there. You don't get the same relative discount with Fields there. So Josh Allen, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. They have a 30 implied team total. At running back this week, we have a couple of guys in the 6K range that I'm already excited about. Joe Mixon, his price is just sitting there at 6.5. They're a 7-point home favorite. He's seen the most carries inside the 10. I think that he's a safe play this week because Higgins and Boyd are priced up. Like if normally I would just say, like we always say, just play T. Higgins. I like Mixon a lot at 6.5.
Yeah, and it was disappointing last night, right, on Monday Night Football. I don't think anyone saw that coming. But what I can tell you, Kyle, is that Zach Taylor is going to look at that game and be like, well, we tried to throw without Jamar Chase. It didn't work. So let's just go back to what we were doing in the first 3 weeks of the season. I'm pretty concerned about their pass rate moving forward. So I do think this is a huge Joe Mixon volume spot. And yeah, you're getting him at like in the mid 6Ks. It's just a good tag for a guy who's touched the ball a ton this season.
Other running back values early in the week. So these are just names to add. Travis Etienne, a little bit cheaper, 6.3 against the Raiders. Talked me into him because I've been kind of slow. Like, I think I was really in early in the offseason. Then he got steamed up to being like a 3rd or 4th round pick in best ball. And now I'm having to come back around because I was told that James Robinson was the dude and he got traded. So tell me about Etienne.
Yeah, I mean, his workload's just been elite. I mean, last 2 weeks, 80% of the snaps combined. And in that time frame, 88% of the running back carries have gone to Etienne. You cannot draw up a better workload for a running back, especially at this price tag. And I'm with you. I was a little slow to come around on him too. It wasn't necessarily just because he got steamed up. It was also, I thought it would take a little while for him to really get his burst back from the Liz Frank surgery. We did see in the first couple of weeks, he really wasn't as effective. He looks awesome right now. And so, yeah, I feel like in this spot, taking on the Raiders, we just saw what Alvin Kamara did to them last week. It makes a lot of sense. And if you're going to give him somewhere in the range of like 18 with upside of 25 opportunities total, it's hard to pass that up at this price point.
There's other names that are intriguing. I mean, Austin Eckler is the RB1 on this slate, so you can't go wrong with a player that's getting 10 catches a game. Dalvin Cook is going to show up pretty well in a lot of projections. He's still relatively expensive compared to the field, but we're waiting for more value to open up this week to be able to say, hey, here's a running back you can play in the 5K range. So any other names you want to mention at running back?
I mean, early in the week, it's kind of tough because I went into it really liking Swift's price tag, but then we had the stuff from Dan Campbell who was like, well, we gave him too many carries last week, and he had 5 carries. And he also confirmed Swift this is to the media, like, I'm not 100% and I'm working my way back. I expect to get more work going forward, all these things. It's tough to pay 6.4 for a guy who his head coach is telling us he got too much work and he only had 5 carries. So the matchup's awesome against Green Bay. I mean, they give it up to everyone on the ground. So he's a good play in theory. It's just, if he's not going to get his full workload, it's tough to buy in. So right now, I think Mixon and Etienne are my 2 favorite plays, especially considering, like we said, the slate as a whole is generally pretty weak.
Yeah, I feel like somebody needs to sit Dan Campbell down and tell him, dude, this is not working. Whatever plans you have, they haven't been working for a while. You've won, 4 NFL games as a head coach with the Lions. Like this is not your thing, buddy. And they need.
Yeah, but how are they against the spread? I mean, come on.
Dan's pocketbook is just flowing. He's got it going on. I'll mention a couple other names just to throw it out there. Kenneth Walker still going to project well against Arizona from a points per dollar perspective. He's only 6.5. I think it's fine. It's not great. And then we mentioned some other names like Cook. Ramondre's still getting a ton of passing work if you want to look that direction at 6.4. I think that's totally fine. Let's talk about wide receivers. I'm just dumbfounded that DraftKings did not change Tyreek Hill's price at 8.5. He's our top points per dollar projection early in the week. So I have him in my lineup, and I get that Waddle's a little bit cheaper at 6.7. But, man, Tyreek just feels so safe right now.
Yeah, it's really tough to argue against. I mean, the guy's on pace for 2,000 yards. It's tough to argue against it, which the former single season or current single season record is, I think it's like 1947 or something like that with Megatron. So that's the level that he's on, and he should be a 9K player. I don't know what they're doing, not changing his price. So yeah, I mean, if you want to play Tyreek Hill, you probably got to play Justin Fields. Not saying that's wrong. It does correlate, but it makes a lot of sense. Also throw out too, the value in this range keeps being very strong each week. I love the low 6, high 5K wide receivers. Chris Godwin's role has just been so safe for cash games. He still isn't finding the end zone, which is going to happen eventually, but he's seeing double-digit targets, and I think it's 3 of his last 4. You get Scary Terry McLaurin, who's quietly seeing about a 25% target share since Taylor Heineke took over. Minnesota, we talked about, Jason and I did, entering last week, over the last 3 weeks, they were number 1 against the run and DVOA. They were 27th against the pass, and we just saw what DeAndre Hopkins did to them. He looks awesome. And then we got to monitor what's going on in LA with the Chargers. We know there's no Big Mike, and Keenan Allen is currently still dealing with the hamstring issue. So whatever's happening there, regardless, Josh Palmer is going to project pretty well against a Falcons team that gives it up through the air. He is just 5.1K.
Yeah, the early guess in the week, Josh Palmer in cash, I think is going to be approaching 50%.
Even if Keenan is active?
I think people have kind of penciled him in as the cheap play early in the week, that he's going to be chalk. Did
you see the Eckler quote too? He does a podcast for fantasy with Yahoo, and everyone was asking like, who should you pick up with the Mike Williams injury? And he didn't skip a beat. He was like, oh, Josh Palmer. So yeah, it makes sense.
His price in the matchup, I think he's going to be easily one of the 2 or 3 most popular wide receivers in the week. Regardless of if Keenan plays, I think he'll be there. I need to say that Amon-Ra is interesting this week at 6.6. I need to.
That price keeps coming down.
I know that's what's more interesting to me. In a game that we like, that's hitting the 50-point mark for us. So I think Amon-Ra is there in the middle range. Can I throw out some cheaper names? Some cheapies, just real gross names that maybe you don't even...
I mean, I'm going to say no, you shouldn't, but you're going to do it anyway, so go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to throw out one that you didn't even know I was going to say. Tyquan Thornton of the Patriots. 3.3K.
Yeah, speedster.
3.3. If you're going to punt, it's not the worst thing you could do.
It's not the best. It's not the worst either.
Okay. Zay Jones at 4.1 against the Raiders. It's a revenge game for our boy Zay. Thoughts?
Which is, that's the metric that matters the most in fantasy, so that makes sense. Go on.
And then I would say, I don't know, is it the most important thing we've ever said on this podcast? Maybe. But my boy, Terrace Marshall Jr. at 3.9.
I cannot believe you actually put this on the doc. I logged in this morning and I saw TMJ and I was like, what the heck is he talking about? I was thinking in my head, like, who could this be? And then I saw the matchup and I was like, oh my Lord, Kyle. Yeah, go ahead, man. The floor is yours.
What is the medical term for LockJaw? Is it TMJ or TJM?
So TMJ, temporomandibular joint, going back to my PT nerdiness,
I know,
is the joint where your jaw is. But people will say, like, I have TMJ. The TMJ is the joint. TMD is the disorder. But yes, that's basically something's going on with your jaw. So
can I just call Terrace Marshall LockJaw from now on?
Oh, brother. Yes. Lock it in.
LockJaw.
Lock that nickname in.
Dude, okay, so, and I won't go too much longer on this. He's cheap. He was up to 92% of the snaps. He's the wide receiver 2 on the Panthers, if you forgot who he was, and he's only 22 years old. So I'm not saying you need to play this. I just wanted to point it out that his price is interesting, and against the Falcons, he showed up.
9 targets last week.
He's not a nobody. This isn't like we're searching.
He's a nobody.
No, dude, he's not Jamal Agnew.
What are you talking about?
He's not Jamal Agnew.
Dude, he hasn't done anything since he's been in the NFL. He barely even played last year.
Dude, what if I told you in a Dynasty League I played him this past week?
You must be awful in that league.
Call it 7-1, and it's a Ballers League.
So, you are a sick individual.
All right, a couple other names we just want to mention. On FanDuel, Chris Godwin's only 6.7, so he's a bit underpriced for his role on a team that we know is going to rank top 5 in pass rate over expectation. I don't love that game, but if I had to pick one player in that Rams, Buccaneers game that's not Cooper Kupp, I think Chris Godwin's the easy cash game play. And then Curtis Samuel is underpriced once again. Since Taylor Heineke's come aboard, he has 21 touches. They've given him 9 rush attempts the last 2 weeks. So at 5.6 on FanDuel, that's really cheap for his role. So I just want to throw him out as an early consideration in cash if you are interested. Any other wide receivers you want to mention other than my boy LockJaw?
I'm so happy that became a thing on the show. No, those are kind of the guys that made my first cut as far as just what stuck out to me. We'll obviously have a lot more when we record for Friday's show.
Please be a thing. please be a thing. Not the nicknames. It's fine, the nickname, but just I'm really bad at one thing in fantasy football. It is looking at wide receivers and saying this is what they will be, because it was there, man. The early breakout age, the draft capital, but he was on the Panthers, and now there are no rules in Carolina. Am I right?
Hey, I see what you did there.
All right, let's finish at tight end.
Yeah, I put on the list just Tyler Higbee. If for some reason Cooper Kupp doesn't play, it sounds like the ankle injury isn't as serious as maybe we thought it was initially. So I think Cooper Kupp does play. But if for some reason he's out, Tyler Higbee at 3.7 looks awesome. His usage has actually come down quite a bit. So I don't have a lot of interest in him if Cooper Kupp is active. But again, the tight end slate is insanely weak. So I'm going to be looking, if possible, to find someone even cheaper than 3.7K for cash games if I can. We'll see kind of what happens with the trade deadline opportunities opening up and injuries and all that sort of stuff. But I want to point him out. His price is cheapest that it's been in the last month.
I mentioned Zach Ertz at 5.1 in that same game. I'll just say Noah Fant's interesting at 2.9 from maybe more of a tournament perspective, but he's cheap. And then I want to throw out another name that is one of the most boring names to throw out in DFS because he's been a punt play that you can use the last couple weeks. And if Darren Waller is still out, you can raise the white flag and go to the island of Dr. Moreau, Foster Moreau, at 3.2. Not exciting. He hasn't done anything this year, but if you get 6 points from a punt tight end on this slate, who cares? It doesn't really matter at all. So, I mean, right now there's not an early favorite. I can just see tight end, roster percentage just spread out, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I played Moreau last week, actually, because of the Waller hamstring issue. And actually, in his games where he started, Moreau seeing a 21% target share, you'll take that for his price. And kind of quietly, like Darren Waller's target share has been about 16%. So I don't know why, but they're using Foster Moreau more than Darren Waller. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but yes, if they're going to keep doing that and his price will stay where it is, he's going to be in play as a punt option if Darren Waller misses.
Do the Raiders make any sense this year of what we thought they were going to do, what we've seen recently from Devontae Adams, what we saw from Josh Jacobs that we couldn't really project, and then we don't know where Darren Waller is? They're a weird team.
They're wild, man. They're absolutely wild.
All right, at defense, I mean, Seattle looks good. It's a game that has a high total, but Seattle is probably the top play.
I think so, based off how good they've been. We talked about it a little bit already, but yeah, they've just been standout. One of the best defenses in the league over the last 3 weeks. We just saw what they did to Arizona a few weeks ago. Now, granted, that was without DeAndre Hopkins. That was the game where Hollywood Brown got injured. But still, the Cardinals are dealing with offensive line injuries. Seattle's been able to get after the quarterback. They have the most sacks in the league over the last 3 weeks. So at 2.5, I think they're going to be very popular for roster percentage. So in cash, I love them. They'd be a fade, though, if they're going to be popular in GPPs.
Yeah, there's more expensive options that I think have a lot of upside. So the Patriots at home against your boy Sam E. I think the Dolphins are not a good defense, but they have a lot of upside against Justin Fields, who gets sacked like it's his job, and it is his job, but he just chooses to do it by getting sacked. I think you could talk me into the Panthers on the road against the Bengals. They're way down there at 2,300. So save your money, people. Spend it elsewhere. Don't spend it at defense. Don't get cute. I bet the Seahawks will end up being one of those teams, and even the Bears. I don't even care. Play the Bears. Just get 3 or 4 points. Get out of there. Who cares, as they say. If you want to play with us, you can go to ballersdfs.com, our DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS Borg plus Betz. I'm back this week, so we're going to be firing up some new contests, including I have a special one, very special one for this next Monday night bets that I haven't even told you about, but I'm telling the people right now.
Insider knowledge.
Yeah, you are getting, right now as you're listening, the same information that Betz is getting, because the look I'm getting is, cool, Kyle, I don't know what you're talking about. But go to ballersdfs.com. We will open up some fun contests for week 9 to keep it fresh. The relationship, you got to rekindle that fire. And I feel like with the people, we need to keep it fresh.
You got to, man. You got to keep coming back for more. That's what it's all about.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode. We will be back on Friday. Betz, sign us off.
Man, what a show. Anytime we get to hype up Terrace Marshall Jr., a.k.a. LockJaw, it is a fantastic show. It's going to be a good week. Kyle's back. We got contests coming out. We got the Discord popping. DFS Pass is cheap. Go get it. We will see you in Discord, and we will see you on Friday.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.